Greetings, errants, glitches, breakaways, thought criminals, and genuinely open-minded and outright curious inhabitants of whatever simulacrum we find ourselves navigating at the moment. You are about to set sail on another free first-hour episode of The Melt. If you find yourself wanting to dig deeper and have the desire to join the conversation during our monthly Melt meetups, you might want to consider becoming a monthly subscriber. For a measly 5 dead presidents per month, you can have access to full-length, early, and exclusive episodes. Just click the Patreon or Locals link in the episode notes below to create the timeline that will set it all in motion. It's suspiciously simple, altogether painless, and just might inspire feelings of bliss and or lingering euphoria. So, without further ado, let the conversations begin!
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
It seems to me to be pretty certain that no matter what this realm is or what our place is in it, that we return here time and time again by way of some system that either tricks us into coming back in order to recycle us like batteries, or possibly to experiment with various iterations of some ancestor simulation, or perhaps we choose to return to take care of unfinished business or resolve some dynamic before we can properly move on to something bigger and better. Whatever the case, I feel that there is enough evidence and first-hand accounts from experiencers and hundreds of reports from researchers that communicate that there's a there. You are most likely familiar with the practice of past life regression, especially if you've heard episode 175 with Steve Burgess, a person who does just that. Well, Steve is the one that put today's guest, Anne Jirsch, on our radar, and she happens to be a leading world pioneer in something called future life progression, which is exactly what it sounds like. Anne was great to chat with and a total treat to have on. I start off the conversation by asking Anne to tell us about who she is and what her background is.
Okay, well, where do I start? I've had a lot of decades. I started off in London. My grandmother was a fortune teller. So I grew up watching my grandmother read the tea leaves, which was really intriguing. She used to do all sorts of things. She used to cure warts and do all sorts of things. And that made me I wanted to be psychic as a kid. I really wanted to be psychic. And I used to sit and try and be psychic, sit there, really try. And I never was. I never got, even by fluke, ever got anything right. So, but I knew it did work, but because I was nosy and I used to listen to me nan and the feedback she got. So I did what everybody else did, late 60s, early 70s. I went off Far East to learn to be psychic. And I by the time I came back, I'd opened up and I kind of knew things.
Mm-hmm.
So
How does that manifest? Is it like an intuition that you get? Do you get visuals? Do you get audio?
I work with cards. I think having a tool gives you that extra bit. It's kind of like you've got the intuition. I usually find things pop into my head, an image or a thought will pop into my head, and it's so strong I can't dismiss it. But I also find you turn over the cards and they say exactly the same thing.
Interesting. Wow. So you've discovered that you kind of have a knack for it.
But I don't think I had it naturally. I think this is something anybody can learn. And while I was out there, I did all the usual, went to ashrams and went to meditation. And I found I'm not very good at meditating. I'm too fidgety. I'm not very patient. So I'd sit there and I'd be scratching my nose and I just wouldn't be very good at it. I met a beggar. This is the maddest thing in Calcutta. He was sitting on like a mat. And I'd go and talk to him every day. And he just taught me. And I used to say, he used to teach me about how to use your intuition, how energy works. And after talking to him for a couple of weeks, I kind of felt myself opening up and I just started to know things.
Interesting. So it's like a muscle that you need to develop. Like, first of all, you have to,
I think so.
yeah, you have to realize that you have it, and then you just need to realize how to work it out.
Well, it's one of the things, and I'm sure you know about Richard Bandler. One of the things he said is if you do something well naturally, you don't know how you do it. So one of the benefits of me going off, investigating, learning how to do this, I can pass it on, I can teach, because I'm constantly learning and trying to examine what is that process of intuition, because it's different for different people. How does this work? How do we make this happen? How do we get better at it? And because I've had to study it all my life in order for it to work for me, I can teach.
And is this something that you do teach to other people?
Yeah. My first book was Instant Intuition. It's called Instant because I'm not patient, so I want quite quick answers. But I teach all the time. People are more intuitive than they realise. But once you know the process, because we've all got a story, we'll all go, "Oh, that time I knew that road's going to have an accident," and blah blah. But once you know the process. Once you stop and think, how did you know that? Was it a thought? Was it a feeling? You asked a question earlier, and it is that process. Oh, it was a clench in my gut, or I found myself hesitating. Once you know the process, you can notice just a slither and go, I'm being warned there, or I'm being alerted to something good.
Mm-hmm. So what you do, we've all heard about past life regressions, but you do future life progressions. Would that be the proper way of terming it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I tell you what happened. I've been reading cards for, by that time, 20 odd years. I was working with past life. I had this massive fascination for past life regression. It's just everyone's magical. And I had some military guys come and they wanted to know if they had past lives together. And they started popping in quite regularly and we'd do sessions and we'd experiment. Mm-hmm. And one day they started to work on each other and they kept seeing me in one of the past lives. And they had a feeling there was some special message there. And so I brought in somebody else to take the three of us back to the past life that we'd shared together. And all three of us jumped forward and saw the attack on the Twin Towers. At the time, there was nothing happened like it ever before. So it didn't make a lot of sense to us. We didn't think, we had no frame of reference. So it wasn't until 3 weeks later when it happened that we saw this. We saw it in detail. So I started to experiment with the soldiers and they consistently predicted the future. The attack on Iraq, Japanese tsunami. They said a black president followed by a blonde president. I mean, it just went on and on. And so we realized that we were actually getting glimpses of the future. And I just knew I had to work with this. So I started to work with clients and I'd take them forward, say 5 years. And this is the bit that got me. And I think you guys will really get this. They'd see something at 5 years, like who they're married to or a house they're in or a career break. They were phoning me a few months later saying it's happened already. And it's as if we were getting the best of the future and bringing it into our current consciousness. And that really appealed to me. It takes so long to get to where we want to be. That appealed.
Interesting. So obviously you probably believe in some form or some roundabout concept of reincarnation. Do you think that there's some people that believe, like Anthony Peake believes that we sort of come back as the same person and we sort of live this various versions of the same life until we sort of get things right. But some people believe that we come back as many, many different iterations. What is your take on that?
Well, that is really interesting. I mean, I follow him on Facebook, and he's a really interesting man. I gather he's traveling around India at the moment, investigating things. Really interesting guy. I think the thing that struck me is when I take people into future lifetimes, by their next lifetime, which could be 80, 100 years, 200 years' time, it's like they're so much more evolved. When you think think of you, if you've had 5 previous incarnations, 50 years in between, you haven't changed that much. But by our next lifetime, we seem to have massively evolved. But I think that's the thing. I think you can be repeating the same patterns. Well, I can imagine. I mean, I had one guy say to me, "Oh God, in the future, I'm married to my bloody wife again." We do money troubles, being bullied. We do repeat patterns. One of the reasons why I like to work with this is I want to go forward and go, no, I want to find the best option in the future. I don't want to keep living the same crap over and over. Let's change that. Let's fast track that. Let's bring the good stuff here now.
Exactly. So do you think that what you're seeing when you do these progressions is just one version of how things can go? Or is it, I mean, obviously, if you know about it, that adds a different element to it, in the sense that if, for instance, you see something that is very negative or something that's very life-changing in a maybe not so pleasant way, maybe that person can take steps so that doesn't happen. Is it, how malleable is all of that?
I find it very malleable, and I think that's one of our lessons. Look, I think you look at the amount of movies and TV shows that are about jumping around in time. Mm-hmm. You didn't have all that 20 years ago. It's like we're ready to understand time, the amount of pop science to do with time. So I feel like we're ready to understand it. And one of the sessions I do is alternate futures. So there's one particular one I do with health is, let's take you to you in 10 years' time on your present path. You're looking in a mirror, what you like, and of course you've aged and you think, well, I've got a bit of bad back now or whatever. Then I take you to your healthiest future. What's different? What have you done different? So I think a few little changes now can make huge difference in the future.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that version of the future that you're seeing is something that might occur if the person sort of just kind of doesn't vary much from their sort of comfortable life path between now and then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you don't have to. Small changes now, in 5-10 years' time, are going to make huge difference.
For sure.
We always think it's some big dramatic thing, but sometimes it's just not eating cake and you're healthy, or walking a half an hour a day. Little things can make a big difference. So, but the key thing is knowing what to do. One of the problems we got these days is too many options. We've got so many options, and what most of us do is jump from too many different things. We jump about all over the place, waste a lot of time. If you've got one option, you work that option, which is why I work a lot with people's careers, because when I talk to people, they're doing a bit of Reiki, a bit of angel card reading, a bit of this, bit of that. And you go, no, let's find the future you. Mm-hmm. Think of anybody that's doing well. You can tell me what they do in about 5 words. The average person out there rambles on about what they do. They don't have that succinct way. And when you got that succinct way, you focus better.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Do you have to sort of, in order to do these progressions, do you have to sort of work yourself up into that state of mind, or is it something that just happens spontaneously throughout your day?
I've done it for so long. I do tend to just, but I don't go into the future that often, to be honest. Not now. I'm a couple of times a year, because I teach people how to become a practitioner of future vision or a coach. And I usually get one of my coaches in and just go, to take me forward next year. I need to see what countries I'm working in. I kind of, or I listen to one of my own recordings. But yeah, I do get glimpses definitely of the future. I suddenly get, like the house I'm in right now, I was living in a different house, no thoughts of moving, and I suddenly saw myself living here, and I had no idea where it was, no plans to move. And you just go, oh, I'm going to be moving in a couple of years.
Interesting.
I'm curious about your nan. Can you kind of go back and explain if there was anyone else in your family who had similar experiences?
Yeah, well, do you know, I don't know if other countries have this, but in England, we tend to say it skips a generation. And I don't know before my nan, I don't know before her. My granddad was, he used to hear voices. I think he was quite a medium. Listen, my grandparents were quite crazy East End people. They were quite wild people. My nan wasn't your average little nan with an apron on. No, they were quite wild people. But yeah, I don't know before that. They say it skips a generation. I was so saying that her daughter, my mother, was brilliant with the pendulum. She ran a garage, like you'd call it a gas station. And everybody in that area that used it, as soon as they were having a baby, they'd say, go and talk to Sylvie. She'll tell you what baby you're having. And she would. She'd know whether they're having a boy or a girl. But my mum did a little bit. She always said she wasn't, but whenever one of her pets were ill, she'd give them healing. So she was to an extent. So my daughter's not so much into it, but my granddaughter, my little granddaughter's definitely, she's got her own box of crystals. She calls her crystal shop. So it jumps a generation a lot of the time.
Interesting. What was I going to say? Oh, you mentioned that you were doing some of these readings for the military. And I was wondering if you ever got the inclination. I don't know what your association with the military is. Perhaps it was just personal with those people, but that this is something that you could see the military wanting to use in order to sort of get a jump on different opponents.
Oh, massively,
Yeah.
massively. I've had police as well. A lot of police and military come to me. In my last book, I wrote about the military, particularly in America. They're good. They're open-minded. I know the American Navy call it spidey sense. They got this brilliant technical name, spidey sense, and because they notice some of their military would have an instinct. There's danger over there. It's a sense of danger. I've written about it in several of my books. And they started to realize some people had that. So they started to teach it. They're teaching the military personnel. One of my military friends, everybody around him can get attacked or whatever, he'll just stand there. He's got this way of not standing in the way of bad things coming towards you. It's that instinct. And I've written about it in several books. Another friend of mine, he was, I think he was in somewhere like Bosnia, and they spent several days driving across fields. And they come to the edge of this field and went, I'm not going in there. You imagine days and days of driving over fields, but you come to this one and you just said, and this other guy in the Jeep said, I'm not going in there either. And the driver just laughed, said, don't be silly. They got halfway across and they got a message, don't move. There's plenty of unexploded bombs. You've gone into the one field that's dangerous. And they had to sit there 2 days till they were rescued.
Interesting. Yeah, I would.
But I find police and military very intuitive because look, us in our primitive form, we had that sense of danger.
Yes.
We would know where the buffalo roamed. We would have to, so we'd starve. We'd have that instinct to find water, to know warring tribes coming towards us. And we lived with that animal instinct. We don't need it now, do we?
Yeah.
We get water out the tap. We go to the local supermarket. We don't seem to need it so much.
Exactly.
That's why when people are in times of trouble, they'll tell you that all of a sudden they knew stuff. It's like the senses completely sharp. You've had it yourself. You've probably had times when tough stuff's happening, because everybody gets that at some point. Your senses are heightened. You start to really have an awareness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the more removed that we are outside of sort of the natural network of things, the more
Mm.
we lose touch with that. We don't have to hunt for food. We just go down to the market and get something. Like we don't have to.
Yeah.
We don't have to be pay attention to any cues. Like there's not going to be a predator coming around the corner in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. I think it's like again that muscle sort of gets a little flabby if you stop using it, and then after generations, it's almost like it's not even there. People don't even realize that's on the menu.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we were bunged in the jungle, our senses would come. One of the military guys said that he was taught what they call the British Army called jungle consciousness. And what they do is they bung you in the jungle, drop you in by parachute, and you're left for 2 weeks. And people have said that's really tough. 2 weeks in the jungle with nothing is really tough. But what he said is it takes 2 weeks in the jungle. And he said the jungle's noisy, but all of a sudden after 2 weeks, you notice the one noise. It all just becomes white noise, but that one noise that's danger,
Yeah,
you can pick it out.
for sure.
Yet that jungle consciousness starts to kick in.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what your thoughts about other frequencies getting kind of muddying the signal. Do you think that that has influenced psychic ability at all with the introduction of EMFs and cell phone towers being kind of ubiquitous now?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I'm quite lucky. It doesn't overly affect me, but I know plenty of people that are affected. I'm quite lucky. I think because I've always lived in cities, I don't think it affects me so much. It's a bit like when people come to where I live. It's a very built up area. If they've come from like a rural area, they tend to get headaches and get ill because they're not used to the pollution. It doesn't affect me. Although I say that, they've had some new things going recently. There's extra supersonic Wi-Fi and a few other things locally. And every so often I feel this really weird vibration go through my head. About 30 seconds, then it goes. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is that? It's like, and you feel it, then it goes. It's very, very strange thing. Yeah, I think it does. But I also think we can block it out. And I think that's really important. People are frightened these days. And I understand the world's crazy. I mean, there's things going on that are so crazy. People's reactions are crazy. I think we have to know how much we're in control as individuals and as a group. So my thing is, my spiritual teacher used to say, if anybody's psychically attacking you, they can't hurt you if you're strong. Your energy is as good as your energy. If you're strong, you've got a good, strong energy, it'll bounce back to them. And I think that's the bit we got to get to. Yeah, there is some crazy vibrations going on, definitely. But I think we have to be able to go, no. I find often just by saying, no, I'm not going to let that affect me, that can kind of almost set up a force field and push it back.
Yeah, I do believe that our minds are much more powerful than we're ever told. I mean, I think there's reasons that we're not told that because there's some people who want control over masses of other people. But yeah, I think it's good to hear it from somebody from your position because, yeah, a lot of people that we talk to are very concerned about 5G towers going up all over the place and this ubiquitous mesh field of EMFs all over the place, smart homes and stuff like that. So that's good to know. Yeah, I think that we need to realize that it's important to, even if you think that you can't do it, act as if you can. Protect yourself against those things. It certainly can't hurt.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the problems we've got today is I find people very negative. I find spiritual people very negative. And I think the more negative you are, the more your energy is dropping. They're forever. I find on Facebook, spiritual people are always full of hate. Oh, I hate him. I hate that person. That anger. Da, da, da. That's just lowering their vibration, and then they wonder why these things are affecting them. I think moaning on Facebook all day isn't helping anybody or anything. It just isn't. I think we have to have that force field, that energy, that vibrancy, get together with focused people and know that we're not victims.
Yeah.
We're not victims. We can do anything.
Exactly. I think it's easy for people on, I'm just using sides just to make a point, but on the, say, mainstream news side, like to keep people in fear just because they're more malleable and easier to control that way. But people on our side who tend to be the questioners can also whip themselves up into states of hysteria too, saying this is coming, there's nothing we can do about it, AI is going to take over the world. Like, that's insane. That's automatically putting yourself in a position of a victim and taking away your power.
Absolutely. I actually got rid of Sky News, BBC. I've got rid of all the news channels. In England, it's a bit difficult to get rid of the BBC, but there is a way to get rid of it without them knocking on your door and threatening you with court. But I've managed to do it, and I don't want any of it. And I tell you, my energy has been so much better since I've got rid of it.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of noise, really, for the most part.
Yeah.
Even if they are reporting on something that's actually happening, it's, I mean, I'm sure it's this way with the BBC too. We have here we have right wing and left wing news. And depending on what your political affiliation is the version of the story that you get. And it's just, both sides are ridiculous.
Absolutely. And it's mainly left wing in England. Mainly it's not 90% left wing. So, yeah. So you are getting that bias the whole time, and people start to believe it. If you put it out there enough, people believe it.
Exactly.
So I'm staying out of it. Get rid of it. You have a clearer. You go more on intuition and feeling, and you don't get caught up in propaganda and bullshit.
Yes, exactly. I noticed that you're, just a brief aside here, you're getting a lot of echo on your side, aren't you?
Oh, am I?
I'm hearing it. It sounds like it's coming from your end, but if you're not hearing it, I was thinking if it was driving you crazy, we can try and disconnect.
No,
okay,
I'm fine.
Okay, fantastic, good. Just wanted to check in on that. Did you have anything that you wanted? Okay, so future life, past life, all of this stuff. I mean, there are people who have said, and I do believe this on some level, but I have a hard time wrapping my rational, intellectual, linear mind around the fact that all time supposedly is occurring at the same time. What is you dealing with future progressions, and I'm sure past life at some point too? What is your concept of time? How do you view time? Do you view it as a beginning, middle, and end? Simultaneously?
It's really, I've got a list of quotes from some of the greatest minds, Feynman, Einstein, a great big long list. And they all say, if you think you understand it, you don't. None of us really understand. But I did in a meditation get shown time, and it looked like maybe a piece of licorice. and it bent. So to me, time's more, I don't think it's all happening at the same time, but I think it's like, say if you've got a piece of wire like this and you bend it, you can jump time. I know you can play with time because I've done it. I mean, you can make time go fast, you can make it go slow, you can jump time. You mind travel, you can mind travel to different times. I do this all the time. So I feel time's malleable. That's the nearest I've got to. I think it's malleable.
Okay. Do you think that time travel more involves a state of mind that you're in, or you think that there's a way you can physically do it if we had the technology to?
I think we will be able to in the future. Yeah, I do think in the future we will be able to time travel. But mind travel, I don't have any doubt. It's like great Professor Rupert Sheldrake said, your brain is inside your skull, but your mind can go anywhere. It can go the past. The remote viewers, you got to remember the remote viewers, the massive amount of research put in by the American government. The remote viewers mainly look at what's happening in other places in their current time, but they've done some great journeys into the past and the future, and their accuracy has been phenomenal. And I know, I'm trying to remember which one it is. It might have been Go Swan. One of the big key names said, it's just as easy to go to the past as the future as it is to mind travel in your current time.
Interesting. Have you ever heard of the Farsight Institute?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I have. And I'm trying to remember what I know about that. Yes, I have heard of that.
Crazy stuff. They have their own streaming channel, but they basically remote view different points in history, different things that have occurred in history. Yeah.
Mm,
And just do their take on it. They did the death of
mm.
Epstein. They did the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. I mean, you name it, they've covered it. It's insane. It's really, I mean, and
Oh,
they,
I should look that up.
yeah, I'll send you a link after the
Please,
show.
thank you.
And sometimes they have 2 or 3 different remote viewers doing the same event, and they then videotape the remote viewers doing their readings, and then they sort of edit them together. And it's really fascinating how they do it. It's really thorough.
Wow.
Yeah, really.
The remote viewers are extraordinary. I mean, I think a lot of them have gone into industrial espionage now
Yeah,
because they can read what's on a sheet of paper in a different building. I mean, their capabilities are really is science fiction.
yeah, exactly. And they're capable of going forward or backward in time in a particular place
Yeah.
too, which is amazing.
Wow, I should look them up.
Yeah.
They sound incredible.
Yeah, we had the Courtney Brown, the guy who kind of started the whole thing on the podcast a few episodes ago. You can maybe
Wow.
check that out as a starter.
Yeah, we'll do. I've been listening to your podcast. They're great.
Well, thank you.
I think for me now, what's really intriguing me now is how time is escalating. Everything's happening. You think in the last 20 years we've had more happen than in the previous 200.
Yes.
It's just time's escalating. And I think in the next 5 years, next 10 years, it's going to be even faster. And I think the problem we got today is we're not going to cope with that amount of change.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem to be reaching a fever point in a lot of ways, depending on which direction you look. Some people, you look on the internet and they're whipping themselves up into a frenzy, but I don't spend a whole lot of time on the internet, so I don't feel like I'm caught up in all of that drama. So there's like, I think the pandemic really brought that out in people. You could tell the people that were glued to their TVs for 8 hours a day because they were
Yeah.
walking out with, almost like suits of armor into public. And then there were people who, seemed to, it was just a Tuesday for them, very odd.
That was really interesting. There's trying to remember his name now, Professor Sikora, I think his name is, great guy. And he was talking a lot about, look, while you've got all these lockdowns and you've locked down the hospitals, we're going to have a backlog of people dying of cancer because nobody's
Yeah.
getting tested. And he was very vocal, but we had a very hot summer that first lockdown. And he said he had elderly neighbours that wouldn't open their window because they thought the disease might come in. They were
Jeez.
sweltering indoors. They thought it would come through the window.
Man, that's awful. Horrible.
Terrified. Fine for older people. Absolutely terrified.
Yeah. How did you navigate that time?
Well, yeah, do you know what I did? We weren't allowed to go out, but I'm at home at the moment, but I usually work from an office.
Mhm.
And I thought, I'm going to go to my bloody office. So you weren't allowed to go out. You could go for a walk every day. And I thought, no, I'm going to go to my office. And I got in my little car, hoping the police wouldn't stop me. The police were actually stopping people.
Wow.
But I thought, they'll probably think I work at the hospital or the shop. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a young person out jollying. And I drove to there's 40 businesses in them offices. I was the only one there for months and months and
Wow.
months. And then after about 3-4 months, one guy started to come in. Nothing. I was there all day. And I just thought, I'm going to go and do what I normally do. So I got in my car, make it no shops open, about a little packed lunch, get in the office, make a cup of tea, and I went to work. And I just transferred all my work online. I just thought, I'm not. And I started making downloadable courses. And then I come back, go for a walk. I didn't upset anyone because we've got a lot of older people where we are, and I don't want to frighten them.
Sure.
I don't want to upset them. They were very frightened. But I just carried on with my business. If friends weren't frightened, I'd catch up with them. If they were, I'd keep away. And I just thought, I'd be respectful.
Sure.
Some people think we ought to lock up down, some don't. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I just did some of my best work. Went for walks, watched good movies, and I made sure we ate really well. And I thought, I tell you what it is. I come from a working class background, and I noticed with my lot, people I grew up with, we're very much back down the hatches. We'll ride this out. We'll ride it out. We weren't being rebellious, weren't being difficult, but we'll ride it out. We're very good at pushing. We've always had tough times because we grew up in a poor background. So we just pushed through it. Weren't happy about it, but we just pushed through it.
Yeah. Do you think
it was a weird time?
It was.
One observation I had, because I live in between. One area is very working class, the other way is very middle class. And I found one group of people didn't get wound up, didn't get stressed, rubbed off. And a lot of them were people that are in AA or NA or been in rehab. They'd already had their dark night of the soul. And what I found, people were phoning me up, absolutely hysterical, going, we're all going to die, we're all going to die. You'd be shocked at how many people were sent me this one picture saying, on our local motorway, there's tanks, we're in military lockdown. And it was a picture of a tank from 10 years ago in Ukraine. It wasn't even English. You know, they're just believing any crazy stuff and getting hysterical saying everybody's going to die.
Yes.
But I found the people that were all right, had just got on with it, everything. The ex that have been big drinkers and druggists had their dark night as well. It was all the people quite middle class, worked in a bank, had squeaky clean lives. They were the people falling apart, thinking, yeah, I know somebody in the government meetings, and yes, we're all dying. And they were hysterical. They'd never had the dark night of the soul.
Exactly.
And I think the first time people stopped, they fell apart. They've always been busy, always been doing things, had life quite easy, nice little job, nice little home. And all of a sudden, they've had what they see as a crisis. They were wrecked.
Yeah.
They were irrational.
Yeah. Same here, for sure. We're in a very left-leaning town, and this whole narrative seemed to really feed on the left here. I'm not sure about there much more, because the people who weren't getting worked up tended to be classified as the Trump supporters and the right-wing conspiracy theorists and all this craziness. So I think a lot of people on the left were doing it just to not appear to be one of the people on the right. It became very political. It was so simplistic and childlike.
I think that was very much the case here. And I think most of the people I mix with in my personal life would be more Trump, because, I mean, they're more to the right.
Sure.
And they wrote it out. They just wrote it out, looked after it. We just kind of went, how can we look after each other? How can we live our life the best we can?
Yeah.
Because obviously the trains weren't running, you couldn't travel about too much. We just made the best of it, and actually had quite nice summers, to be honest. We just got on with it and had some nice summers.
Going back to the time issues, in the sense of future progressions, I'm going to ask you something very mechanistic, but maybe you don't have an answer, because maybe it's something that, as you said, sometimes people who do this naturally can't tell you how they do it. But do you have any ideas of how one is able to do something like see into the future or see into the past? Or do you have any idea about, how that works? Or is it just something that just comes to you and you do it?
I think it works in a number of different ways. Okay, so predicting the future, it upsets psychics when I say this, but sometimes it's our brain can process information. Malcolm Gladwell's Blink very much points that out, but I'll give you one example, and it's a study from about 1943, I think, really old, and they studied train crashes, and they found out that up to 25% less people caught that train than normally would. They took into account bad weather, holidays, all the other variables. Up to 25% less people took that train.
Interesting.
And there was something in them that stopped them going. And I think there's part of us that have that instinct where we kind of just know something. Or there's that thing where we do it at will. I do it at will. So mind travel, you've got to have some way of coding time, and then you travel along a timeline. I create timelines and mentally travel along them, and then drop in to say years' time to get a sense of what's happening.
Interesting. How do you? Oh, do you have?
I was just going to say, do you think that there's any correlation between political affiliation and psychic ability?
It's interesting. I think a lot of spiritual people are very left leaning,
Uh-huh.
and I honestly I step back from a lot of spiritual people because they drive me nuts. They absolutely fry my brain. I don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist
Uh-huh.
because I tell you why. Because they believe anything. I could make up any crap right now, and they would believe. They just believe everything. They never check anything. I think there's weird stuff going on in the world, but they just believe everything. And they're very much always angry,
Mhm.
always upset with somebody.
Yeah.
I've just unfollowed one earlier today, and it's because she's always, every day, two people in the last week, because they put up really nasty stuff about Trump. Now, I don't care whether they like him or don't like him or think he's great or don't think he's great. The reason why I've unfollowed him is because they say horrible personal things. Oh, he's fat. Oh, he's stupid. And look at his hair. Nothing about what he's done or
Yeah.
what he hasn't done.
Sure.
Nothing about what he's achieved. It's just all. And I just thought, how can you live a spiritual life and say you're spiritual and then come out with really nasty stuff every day? So I don't want that energy. So I unfollowed them. I find, I think there is. I think a lot of spiritual people think they want to save the world. But it's like a study showed, a lot of people who say they're empaths and don't have any empathy. Not really. They think they do. So, yeah, I think there is a big difference. I find people to the right more scientific.
Although the left does claim to believe the science, capital T, capital S, but I think the science that they're talking about is just the science that backs up their view on things.
Well, this is it. They tend to get the science to fit their narrative,
Yes.
don't they? They don't really question it. I mean, one of the things I've said is climate change, and so I've got a friend. You've got Big Bang Theory. I've got a friend who, just like Sheldon, his capacity to process data is incredible. And he tells me the data, and I go, but how do we know the data is true? One of the things I'm finding is I don't believe the figures we're being given for lots of things actually fit.
Yeah.
I don't think they do.
Yeah.
I think they're given the wrong data. So we can go, oh yeah, climate change, things are getting hotter. I'm sitting in my garden. It's not hotter than 10 years ago. It bloody well isn't.
Exactly.
I'm sitting here. I can feel it.
Yes.
I remember hotter summers. You know what I mean? But they believe the data. I think they give false information. But they'll believe, you're right, the left will believe it blindly and make a big thing out of it. Make themselves to the right and won't let us go to work.
I think because the left's issues are so, they seem to be much more emotionally driven, then they're more susceptible to manipulation.
I think they're more in the echo chamber. And I find that they get into a little group of people and they all feed each other. So as soon as you say something that's not part of that group's narrative, they go psycho. They get really nasty. You're stupid. You're this, you're that. So I don't bother arguing. I've got no interest in even having conversations with them because they're so rigid in their thinking. They'd never stop and go, oh, yeah, you could have a point there. They're never going to do that in a million years. So yeah, I find there's no point in talking to them. They don't think they're rigid in thinking, but they've already got their bias.
Yeah,
They've already got that bias there. And so they filter everything to fit that bias.
They're already on the right side of history. So you just need to realize that.
Absolutely.
Let's see. What was did you have something that you wanted to follow that up with? Okay.
What I was going to say is the reason that the marketing executives had to change the name from global warming to climate change is because it's been 1 degree, like the ocean has risen in temperature 1 degree in like the past recorded history. I think it's a few thousand years. So they changed it to climate change because the climate is constantly changing. So it's easy.
It's called seasons. Yes, it's called weather.
Exactly.
Cycles, the cycle of nature. Yeah, and and they're
Well,
manipulating the weather
Carrie
too.
Mullis, Nobel scientist, said this, didn't he?
Yeah,
he said the world gets hotter, it gets colder, and in our arrogance, we think we can change that.
Yeah, exactly. I love Carrie Mullis. Rest in peace. Who
Yeah,
invented the
fabulous guy.
PCR process, and strangely enough, passed away shortly before the COVID pandemic started. Not saying there's any
Yeah, it's a
connection,
real
but
shame. Had a lot more to give that guy. I really liked him. He wrote an amazing book called Dancing Naked in the Minefield, and I must read it again because it's so good.
yeah, you brought that home from the library, right? Yeah, I want to read that book too. I would love to have him on the podcast. We should get out our Ouija boards and try. So going back to the future, and you talk about, you've talked about in other conversations too, taking people in specific increments of time. How do you know that? How do you know what those increments are? How do you know how far or how close? Because you also mentioned going like 1,000 years or something, or 3,000. Yeah. How do you judge that?
That was actually very difficult. I was going 100, 200 years into the future, and I found that great. That's how I wrote my third book. I'd go 200, 300 years into the future, find out what we know then, and bring it back to now, write it up into a book. So people say, "Oh, I love your information. It's all new. Where'd you get it from?" I get it from the future. But 1,000 years was an interesting one. I gave a talk in London, and somebody asked about 1,000 years, and I struggled to get to that for a little while. And the reason being is we're so much more advanced then that what I was asking was too stupid for our future selves to even bother answering.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like past you that's in a cave trying to communicate with you now.
Yeah.
You'd be going, I can't bother to talk to you. What you're asking don't matter.
Yeah.
Not relevant. So I wasn't asking the right questions. And it took me quite a while. Then I made that connection with myself in 1,000 years, and massive change came from then. I mean, now I'm constantly downloading information. It's a lovely experience to get connect, because we're so kind of wise by then. We're so wise. We've gone beyond all the silly stuff.
Good.
We're wise and we're serene, and we've created a better life, better realms, better worlds.
Are we still using money?
No, that's a bit funny enough. My publisher said to me when I first started writing about this, and I'm going back over 20 years, I kept saying there's no money in the future. We could not understand how can there not be any money? No, there isn't. There won't be money in 100 years. I'm not happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
I like proper money. I like to have a purse with cash in it.
Sure.
I want money. I don't want numbers on my phone, but there's no money in the future.
Well, I think the how I see that as a sort of symptom of evolution is that we're not trying to monetize something that we should already have access to. Although we could go out in the forest and pick fruit from the trees, hunt for our food.
Yeah.
We used to be connected to those. To our livelihood, and now there's so many middlemen in between us and things that we used to be able to access, naturally on our own. That's why I asked that. So you said there's a difference. You tried to have a conversation with some people or something in the future, but then it made more sense when you contacted yourself in the future. Was that a future incarnation?
Yeah. Who's going to look after you better than your future self? So I found with my future self, what I did was I then took a group of people that I've done, people have trained with me. And I think I brought in about 8, put them in a room and took them on a mind journey, 1,000 years to meet their future self, not to talk amongst themselves, not to collaborate in any way, just write down what came to you. And they all had very, very similar experiences. That was really nice. They all kind of described themselves as wise and serene and not completely informed. That was interesting. It's almost as if they weren't completely light. It's almost like we're quite dense now, as if our actual form was lighter, but a good sense of purpose they're there for, but not needy light. It's like we're children now. It's like 1,000 years, we're more grown up.
Mm-hmm. I would hope that would be the case, yeah. Because sometimes it seems like we're going backwards instead of forwards. Like our tools are getting more evolved than we are.
Well, yeah, but it's also that it's like you go to the bank, go to put money in, you're standing there 10 minutes. It used to be technology hasn't made things easier.
No.
It seems to have made life more complicated.
Absolutely.
Just using the car park, simple things more complicated now than what they used to be. The technology hasn't helped us. I think the next 100 years, we really will. It's not the easiest time. It's not terrible, but I think you go 500 years or more, then the world settles down. One thing I wanted to mention to you, because I just think it's something you'll get. When I first started looking at 100 years' time, I remember saying, people are so calm, the world's so much better, everybody's more unified. And I thought how good that was. And then I remember I'm trying to communicate with people in 100 years, and I'd say to them, where'd your family originate from? I'm always interested in people's ancestry. Where'd you originate from? And they just stare at me and wouldn't answer. If I asked about money, they just stare at me and wouldn't answer. And it's only been in the last 4 or 5 years, I suddenly realised, no, they're not serene in 100 years' time. They're subdued.
Mm-hmm.
They're subdued. And that bothered me. I started to feel quite concerned that they wouldn't talk about their ancestry or where they're from, because where we're from, we should be proud of our genetics, shouldn't we? This could probably gonna sound mad, but I think there's a big, big conspiracy to break our identity. So we got no identity, and I think that's how you control people.
For sure.
So I can see this happening for gender, sexuality, your class, your background, your colour, everything. I think we're going to lose our identity over the next 100 years, and that's how we become so subdued.
Yeah, I can totally see that, especially when you take it into the realm of transhumanism, like where you go into the virtual world and you can be whatever you want to be, and which I think is a bunch of bullshit anyway. I don't think there's any way to digitally transfer your consciousness to a server. I think that's just some fantasy of of Ray Kurzweil, who missed his father and vows to meet him in the virtual world somehow. But yeah, I think that takes it to an nth degree. Like not only our identities are not relevant anymore, but our bodies aren't even relevant. And that's what's just freaky.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just see people living individually in big blocks of flats. I don't know what it's like where you are, but more and more, the amount of blocks of flats that have gone up is insane. With just so many huge blocks of flats. And it's mainly people living on their own, and a lot of them are working from home. So a friend of mine said it's like living in a filing cabinet.
Yeah.
All these people living in a filing cabinet.
Exactly.
So you kept separate. You're not mixing with people. Your social life's going down the pan. We used to go out a lot. We don't go out so much now. And you lose your identity. You might as well be plugged into something, mightn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Do you believe in retrocausality? Do you believe that you can affect the past from the present?
Do you know, it's something that we have done or experimenting with, and one of the areas I do like to work with is addictions. Now, might not be quite what you're saying, but in China, they did some research with addicts. They get them into rehab, and you can imagine there's quite a high rate of people going back to drugs the minute they leave rehab or within 6 months. And what they did was they changed their past. They got them to change their memories. So that time you went and got off your bonds, that time you went and took all them drugs and you got into trouble with the police and blah, blah, blah. They took them out and put in memories of them being healthy, strong, going for a run, not doing bad things. And their reoccurrence rate plummeted. So changing the path as a mind journey, huge. It's a bit like false memory syndrome, but only in a very positive way. Yeah, but can you actually change big events? Difficult to say at the moment, I think. Difficult to say.
Yeah, go
That's
ahead.
so curious, because so much of addiction is related to the identity of being an addict.
Yes.
So I really like that, because it's your life is the story you keep telling yourself over and over and over again. So if you go back and change that initial origin story, then I can see how that would change your past. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really clever stuff. We're doing some experimenting. In fact, I've got a meeting in a couple of weeks with an addiction expert, and Yeah, you really can. If you can play around with the mind, one of the things I do when I work with addicts is I get them to pretend that the last year they've been completely clean. I've just done it with a lad who's got a cocaine problem. The last year you've been completely clean. You feel better than you've ever felt in your life. It tricks the brain to make you think that you're not an addict now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of addiction is predicated on the dynamic of the spiral. Like it's easy to get caught in a spiral. Like you do something under the influence of a drug, you feel ashamed. In order to distance yourself from the shame, you do more drugs. And then you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into that. And it's hard to break free of that. I think that's why it's so hard for people to get out of that sort of circle of mania. It's because of the past.
But it's also your life. Everything. I mean, I've got an addictive nature, so I've stopped drinking alcohol 7 years ago. But I mean, I'd had plenty of years of drinking way too much, and it's part of your lifestyle and the people you mix with.
Yes.
It becomes part of everything you do, the partying, the fun inside. I remember a friend of mine who was a nightmare with the alcohol, and her husband said, "Have you seen my wife?" And I said, "Yeah, she's down the pub. She's with so-and-so. They've had a bad week." He said, every day somebody's got something to celebrate, or they've had a bad week,
Yes.
or she needs to keep them company.
Yeah.
And every day there's an excuse to drink. And that's her lifestyle. That's the lifestyle. It becomes part of who you are and your life and everybody you mix with. And the other thing is, one girl that stopped drinking said to me, "I'm so bored." Because it's actually quite an exciting lifestyle. It's not
For sure.
good, it's not positive, it's messy.
Yeah.
You live in all these dramas, but it's not boring. And some people have this huge gap when they start, where
Yes.
they think, "Oh, I'm just sitting here looking at the walls. I've got no fun, I've got no drama, I've got no bad stuff, I haven't got the police chasing me up the road." So by changing the past, you start to fill in them gaps and create a better present by putting in, I could have got that job, I could have studied that subject, I could have got fitter. You start to fill in the gaps because you stop an addiction. You've got this great big hole that you need to fill.
Yeah, exactly. It was like that the first time that I quit drinking for 6 years. I was in I had just turned 30. So I had drunk pretty intensely for about 10 years before that. And I think I was just emotionally stunted. Like I kind of emotionally stopped evolving when I started drinking so much. So when I stopped, I had a lot of fucking homework to do at that point. There was a whole stack, tons of stuff that I needed to attend to. And that was kind of daunting. And my life became boring and, because I had to face all the stuff that I'd kept at arm's length for a long time. Then eventually, after that 6 years, I started drinking again, not as bad as I did before. But then I stopped a second time, and I've been sober for about 6 years. But I didn't have that same, I think I was more evolved. I didn't have that same boredom. Like I felt like life was much easier when I wasn't involving myself in these dramas that I kept. And you probably know exactly.
It does create the dramas.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So avoiding all that became a relief instead of like, oh my God, now I've got to face myself. And, so it was great the second time around. And I don't ever foresee going back because I'm very happy being lucid and present. So.
Yeah, I'm much the same. I actually thought I can drink or I can really, I was functioning, you function, but the work I wanted to do, I just knew I could do so much more.
Yes.
Having a clear head, and that my work's just got so much stronger since, massively stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that for sure. What do you think of the Mandela effect? Do you think that's a thing?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I actually was pondering that a little while ago. Yeah, it's a weird one because we do have like a collective energy, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm still pondering that, to be honest.
Yeah, same here.
I'm looking at that a little while ago and trying to, I need to kind of ponder that a bit more.
We'll get back to that in a future conversation. Do you think that, and maybe we kind of touched on this earlier, but do you think that looking into future events skews them in a way that maybe the peak that you're getting into it is almost rendered irrelevant just for the simple fact of looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really, you make really interesting points. I realised a little while ago, well, quite some time ago, the very act of seeing the future changes it. Because if you see that the house you're planning on moving to in 6 months' time, you suddenly realise the neighbours are horrendous. You don't move there.
Yeah.
You move somewhere else. You kind of make better decisions. It's part of the coaching work I do, and I teach people to be coaches, is people go and train in something and they're really excited by it. 6 months later, everybody's doing it. I mean, in England, we're just falling over hypnotherapists. There's millions of them. They're all hypnotising each other. None of them can get any bloody work. Same with Reiki and same with angel cards.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people are doing the same thing. So if you go into the future and see that and head it off, don't you? You think, I'm not going to do that. That's what everybody else is going to do. I'm going to do something else. You have to be ahead of the game. You start to think ahead and see what other people aren't doing. So you do start to it changes the present. It changes your decisions now. But very apt to see it changes it.
Well, unless you have anything else, we can draw it to a close. I guess we're about at 2 hours. Okay.
Well, I absolutely love your show, and I'd love to take you two into the future. You drop me a message.
Okay.
We'll set that up. I'd love to do that as a gift. I think your show's amazing.
Well, thank
I'd love to see where you guys are heading off.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll definitely take you up on that for sure. Thank you so much, Anne, for sitting down and having a chat with us and telling us a little bit about what you do and what you think about what you do in life and all of that. It's been very, very fascinating and informative. Perhaps you can let the people listening or watching know where they can find your work.
Absolutely. If you just go to, if you look me up, and Jirsch, I'm not shy, but you could go to futurevisiontraining.com.
Okay. And they can get to basically everything Anne Jirsch related from there. Absolutely.
And there's AnneJirsch.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I'm about to pop up, say hi.
And you can get your books through your websites too?
Yeah, you can, but they're Amazon.
Okay.
They're all on Amazon.
Gotcha.
Just look on Amazon, you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, wonderful meeting you, Anne. Thank you. I'm glad we were finally able to choreograph this. Took a little hit and miss, but we finally nailed it.
Absolutely. Really, a real joy talking to you.
Likewise. And we'll have to do it again sometime.
We will.
All right. And we'll definitely get a hold of you about setting up a session.
Love to. Okay. Please do. Let's do it.
Fantastic. All right. Take care.
Man.
Take care.
Yes.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Farewell. What did you think, my dear?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
She was great.
Yeah. She was good.
Super cool.
Very cool.
Like the Sheldrake Connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's very down to earth and no nonsense. And it was interesting to get into those other topics with her, which I've never heard her get into before, like the pandemic, gender stuff. I think most, at least the podcasts that I've heard her on before, were too polite to get into that kind of stuff. They weren't, they didn't feel safe to go into those territories, but it's good. It's interesting to know that somebody who you're drawn to because of their, whatever it is that they do in the world or whatever it is they offer to the world, in this case, Future Life Progressions, that sort of initiating the conversation, the initial conversation, and then having it veer into territories that overlap with other conversations, not only that you and I have had, but that we've had on this very podcast with other people. It's interesting, the little connection, the little web we weave.
Yep.
You're just not very articulate today. I don't know why that is. And there's you're allowed to be, for sure. I've had my moments too.
I enjoyed it. I was listening.
Yeah.
I was listening to her talk. It was very, very compelling.
Yeah.
I'm curious about it. I would love to have a session with her to see what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely want to take her up on that. Did you just yawn?
No.
And Kelly being her friend, and oh man, that's exciting. That's fantastic. I've been trying to get through that wall for a long time, so it'd be nice if she could help out with that. Kelly J's the bomb, yo. No, she's just a no nonsense strong woman who has done a lot of positive things in the world of gender.
Is she another Posey Parker?
She is Posey Parker.
She is Posey.
They're one and the same. I don't know why she's known as Posey Parker in some circles and Kelly J. Keene in other circles, but yeah, that's it. That's her.
That's it.
Yeah.
Don't we have some of her merch?
I have gotten one sticker
Stickers?
from her before.
Yeah, but didn't she send us a bunch of stickers?
That's somebody completely different.
Okay.
Yeah, who stopped getting a hold of me suspiciously after the episode that came out with Rachel.
Oh, Wilson.
Wilson, thank you,
Yeah.
about the connection between witchcraft and
Yeah.
feminism. I don't know if there's a connection, but it seemed like she stopped getting, and I will not mention her name.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I was just wondering if it was the same.
I would still love to have her on too. So if you're listening, we'd love to have you on.
And you
Get a
know
hold of
who-
us.
and
for
you
gosh
know who
darn
you
sake.
are.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for all the great stickers that you sent.
Yeah.
But Anne was fantastic. I really am looking forward to doing a session with her, and I like all of the concepts that she was talking about as far as looking into the future and not in a sense of, in the context of predestiny. Like you're going to see the future, the only future there is, and you'll just see what happens, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. But it's more like you're seeing the timeline from the viewpoint of where you're currently at in your timeline, in your current timeline, and that is just merely one possibility amongst many different possibilities. And from what she was saying, you choose the one that is more favorable to what you want to manifest.
Right. And maybe that's why you can't do group sessions like that, because there is free will, and that you can't necessarily change someone else's destiny or their history. People have to do that themselves.
True. Unless you have a group of people that are already connected and they have one thing in mind, or a group of concepts in mind that they want to all collectively aim for. Mm-hmm. But getting everybody in a 100 square foot mile radius to do that might be a little more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that that's like saying, could you change Germany's history? Could you change Russia's history? I think there has to be a collective agreement on that. Future agreement and past agreement. So I don't know that you could necessarily change like a collective history.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that would work. Yeah, that's gets into all kinds of complicated concepts. Do you change it so much that the history books change too?
Well, you're changing your perception, but you can't necessarily change everyone's perception of something. So I don't know if it would work.
I like what she was saying too about going back and changing your story, changing your memories in order. I think that might help you in some senses sometimes too, because sometimes you refer to your story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps I'm not trying to put you on the spot on the air.
No, there's a lot there.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of reasons why I haven't. And I think primarily it's because we're going into a completely different.
Yeah, we don't need to do that.
tributary.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to.
It's okay.
We'll talk about it afterwards, after hours.
On another show.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I think that's, and it makes sense too. I mean, especially in the circumstances of addiction, where sometimes I think we can identify with our story so much so that it becomes the cage that we build that we
Yeah.
have a hard time getting out of.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get. I started to go. There was a couple of times where I wanted to interject and say something, but then I just kind of let it go. But where I was headed with the identity politics of alcoholism or drug addiction or any type of a AA group think setting is that in my experience with those settings, what I found is that a lot of people are very married to their story and are very married to the glory days of their alcoholism or their drug addiction, or it seemed like there was a lot of one-upmanship in these meetings. So one person would tell their story and it would be, I crashed my car, I broke into the bank, I did all these horrible things. And then the next person would come up and they would have to top that story.
I raped my dog.
And so then the idea is not, it's a confessional and I'm sharing these painful truths to get them out off of my shoulders or to unburden myself. But it's more like I'm competing with who was the biggest drunk, who fucked up their life worse than the other person. So that becomes the identity, as the alcoholic is the identity, and all the things that are wrapped up in that. So from my perception, I think that people that get involved in the identity politics, it's because being an alcoholic isn't sexy anymore. It's not romantic. Being a cigarette smoker isn't romantic. Being a drug addict isn't romantic. Now you got to take it to the next level. And the next level is not only am I all these things, but now I want to mutilate my body too on top of that. So it's like, it's this battle of who suffers the most, who's most disenfranchised. And I think that that seems to be a response to the alcoholic set. So it's like the stoic person who drank themselves to death. The grandfather raised the kid who has her issues, who raised a kid who has her issues. So it's like we've just switched issues, but none of us have fixed anything really. Mm-hmm. So the alcoholic didn't fix the alcoholism because they're counting the days the last time they had a drink. The food addict didn't fix their problem, and now they're raising this person who has gender dysmorphia, and that person's not fixing their problem. So we're just shifting the problem to whatever is trendiest right now. And none of those things are actually getting fixed. We're just hiding behind our afflictions.
Yeah. I think identifying as an alcoholic is ridiculous, as if that were the only thing that somebody was. Maybe they engaged in alcoholism.
Right.
And even then, like, I don't know. We could go into it being a disease or not a disease, which I think emphatically it is not a disease and has nothing to do with genetics, or very little, a negligible amount perhaps. But also the practice of these organizations to continue. I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, I'm so-and-so, I'm a drug addict.
Right, that's my point. Yeah. So your identity is completely enmeshed, not in healing from those things. It is being that thing. And so it kind of entrenches you and keeps you in that, it kind of holds you into that space. So it's the same thing with the gender ideology. So your ideology is that you're an alcoholic and your behavior is responding to that ideology. And it's the same thing with the gender thing. So I guess what I'm saying is, are we really healing anything? Or are we just redressing these issues? And they become, it's like, this is the issue of the day today. So today it's the trans issue. Next year, it might be race again. So it's like,
But are you saying, are we healing anything individually or collectively?
I'm saying in doing this type of work, is this really healing? Like, are we really healing people if we are just passing another baton of identity to someone else that they can now adopt whatever
Yeah.
their thing
No,
is?
that doesn't do anybody any good. Just like passing on, well, my daddy was a Christian, so I'm
Exactly.
a Christian. Like that doesn't, you've got to come to that yourself.
Right.
And how you feel and what your relationship is with it. You can't just take somebody else's version and sort of tailor it to your own situation. I think you've got to, you've got to interact with it in your own particular way. And maybe, just because you're 3 generations before you were fundamentalist Christians, maybe Christianity doesn't work out for you, or maybe, you in a different version of Christianity I think there's so many, just to talk about the AA and NA, I think there's so many destructive things around those organizations. They work for some people. I mean, they do the tiny job for the people that stick with them of keeping people away from their substance. That tiny job. Everything else, I think, is kind of destructive because it keeps them in a circle, whether they're actively going downward in that circle, they've just pressed the pause button on their downward spiral.
Yeah, but it's not dealing with the root with that first brick.
Yeah.
That we were talking about. It's
Exactly.
like getting down into it. So
it's dealing with the last brick almost.
Right. So I guess what I'm curious about is in her process, is she getting down to that last brick, and is that where the healing is really happening, or is that person just deciding, now I'm a bricklayer, like now this is what I do, is I just deal with bricks?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either. I mean, I think
Case by case basis, I guess.
I think that's where I'm always a little bit of skeptical of like the group environment of doing any type of that work. But it sounds like this is a very individual therapy that she's doing. I would be curious to know kind of what the long-term effects of that are, because I can see where going back and changing the story makes a difference. And I wonder from a quantum level how that works. Like if you're actually changing your genetics, if you're changing your DNA by rewriting that story.
Why bring DNA into it?
Because we're talking about generational healing. We're talking about DNA. We're talking about cellular memories, things that are embedded in us. So my grandpa was an alcoholic. My grandpa wasn't an alcoholic, but if he was, and then my dad was, and then I was. So there's some generational thing that's happened in my DNA where maybe there is a generational component to alcoholism if it's just seeing the behavior.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily a genetic code.
Yeah. I think it's more psychological or psycho-spiritual than anything else. I don't think it's as simple as that. If it were, we were talking about a condition or a disease that manifests itself and amounted to your calf muscles deteriorating slowly throughout your life, that would be something different. But it's predicated on the whole concept of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, takes an active participant in it. So that's where genetics is thrown out of the window to me, because you can choose to act on that or you can choose not to act on that.
Right. But not if you're a crack baby or if you're a fetal alcohol baby. You're that decision was made for you. So
Sure.
There's circumstances. It can be all of the above. Is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. Anyway, we've kept these fine people here long enough. Thank you so much for listening and watching. It is greatly appreciated. Is that yeah. Okay. I thought I was looking at the camera, but it didn't look like on the screen. Probably because I was looking at myself on the screen. Oh my God. It's like a hall of mirrors. Thank you all so much for listening and watching, and it's greatly appreciated. Hopefully you gleaned something positive from this. I had a great time and was a great person to hang out with for a couple of hours, and I look forward to setting up our session or our individual sessions to have a progression, and of course we will report on that.
Yes.
If you would like to get a hold of us for guest ideas or whatever, praise, we haven't said casserole recipes in a while. We haven't had a casserole in a while. You can contact us at themeltpodcast@protonmail.com or
hunter-muse@protonmail.com.
Thank you so much. We very much appreciate you. And thank you all who support us through Patreon or locals. You are also very much appreciated. And we will be having, I was going to say we're going to have a meetup this Sunday, but this will be a long time in the past. This is our future selves talking to our past selves. No, I don't know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Anyway, much love. Fare thee well. Until next time.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for making it this far. If you've liked what you've heard and are thus inspired to contribute to the well-being of the Melt, there are a few easy ways to do that. The most tangible being financially, which can be achieved by clicking the Locals or Patreon link in the episode notes, and then you will be led through the process of starting your monthly subscription for a mere $5 a month. This will give you access to exclusive episodes, full-length episodes, and you can participate in our monthly Melt meetups, where we can congregate together as a community and often get a chance to chat with some of our guests more intimately. Another way to help out would be to go to wherever it is that you listen to the Melt and leave a favorable review or rating. You can also spread the word via sharing or recommendation to friends and family, either in person or virtually. And lastly, if none of those options are readily available or appealing to you, simply send your positive thoughts and intentions. In an interconnected and quantumly entangled multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.